Jenny, you're muted. Please unmute.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm welcoming you again, this time not muted. My name is Jenny Parks. I'm the VP of Policy and Research at the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. The title today is How States and Systems Can Support Practitioner Efforts to Strengthen Dual Enrollment. And it's our webinar series. Today is on the innovative program that is in Ohio. So I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, we are recording this webinar. Second of all, the recording and other resources will be available on MEC's website after the event, but you will also receive an email that will include links to those as well as a link to a survey so that you can tell us how we did today and so that we can do better in the future. And as I mentioned, this is part of a webinar series, and we will be, this is the second of 5. So thank you for hanging in there, and don't forget to sign up for the others. We are conducting this series of webinars in conjunction with the Community College Research Center, College and the High School Alliance, the Complete College America, the National Alliance for Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships, and Zenth Consulting. Today, our guest speakers for the webinar are John Fink, Senior Research Associate and Program Lead, Community College Research Center; Sarah Griffin, Research Associate, Community College Research Center; Nadia Leary, College Credit Plus, Lorain County Community College; and Becky Stewart, Program Manager for the College Credit Plus at the Ohio Department of Higher Education. So I am going to turn it over now to Sarah. Oh no, John. Hi, John. John's going to take it from here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Hey, good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you all, our Midwestern colleagues, talking about dual enrollment and expanding access here. Just on the next slide, I'll go over our agenda here. So here we have 2 folks from Ohio that are joining Sarah and myself, researchers at CCRC. Nadia Leary from Lorain County Community College and Becky Stewart from ODHE oversees the state's dual enrollment program, College Credit Plus. And in the next slide, I think we have the agenda. We're going to sort of, we had a research partnership with ODHE funded by the Joyce Foundation, where we learned about this innovative programs policy that's really focused on broadening access to dual enrollment. So we're going to go over the findings from that study, and then we're going to open it up to discussion to learn about this policy, which was back in 2017, which feels like ages ago, and how it sort of transformed into a statewide change to eligibility and what's happened since from both the state and one of the college's perspective. So in the next slide, just to sort of share that at CCRC, we've been studying excellent and equitable dual enrollment partnerships for the past few years, really kind of documenting college and high school dual enrollment partnerships where there are very strong outcomes for dual enrollment students in dual enrollment courses and after high school, but there's also good and fair access for all students to those programs with a focus on, equalizing access for Black and Latino and low-income students. And we've described this sort of deep or dual enrollment equity pathways framework for research in a couple of recent documents here that are linked in this QR code. You can get more information and learn more about our deep research. The research base for a new approach to dual enrollment that prioritizes college access and attainment as like a real career pathways and workforce development strategy, as well as what some of this looks like in practice based on our field work to colleges. So in the next slide, we can just sort of click through here, but just to sort of frame what we're talking about in today's webinar, just that over the years, and CCRC has played a role, but there really have been many researchers that have documented the positive effects of taking some type of dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, dual credit, what have you course in high school, even just 1 or 2 courses, let alone more intensive models like early college high schools that have very strong effects. But we know that for many years of research that these courses and programs, although they're implemented very differently, in large effect, have a positive post-secondary effect for students, providing a jump start on college. And this last study I really appreciated from Texas, which sort of focused specifically on students who had a challenging transition to high school, from middle school to high school, who were struggling academically in 9th or 10th grade, but sort of were turning things around in 10th and 11th grade and had the opportunity to take a dual credit course in Texas. And found that even for these students who, I think the title is, Should Students Falling Behind in School Take Dual Enrollment Courses? Even for those students, it had this real transformative and positive effect in terms of college enrollment and completion. And I think that, that study, it does sort of symbolize how researchers have really broadened the view to not just like, does dual enrollment work, but how can we make it work better and for more students? And that's really what the policy in Ohio was focused on when it was created back in 2017. So in the next slide, this just sort of summarizes what we know from national data, that although dual enrollment has a huge and positive effect for students, many students can't get access to these courses for one reason or another. In particular, Native American, Black, Hispanic, multiracial, Pacific Islander, students with disabilities, and English learners, we've shown that are underrepresented in dual enrollment compared to their the K-12 populations. And in the next slide, one of our reviews of like, why do we see these gaps in access for those and other students, really summarized what we know into different policy reasons for those gaps in access. Practices are usually a lack of practice, a lack of outreach, a lack of advising, a lack of supports, and then mindsets, beliefs about who dual enrollment is for, that it's only for advanced students, can be some of the drivers in those gaps of access. But in this presentation, this webinar, we're going to really focus on the policy levers that have resulted in the gap of access. And really one of the big ones, which has been, the eligibility standards. And I think as a field, we're really seeing a change in eligibility, both at the college and state level, from primarily and oftentimes only using a single high stakes standardized placement test, to having more alternative or multiple measures for placing into these courses. And we had the great opportunity of working with the state of Ohio to evaluate one such change. And my colleague Sarah is going to share more about that project.
Thank you, John. And hi, everyone. Hello to the Midwestern Higher Education Compact and to everyone who's joined today's webinar. I'm Sarah Griffin, and I'm a researcher at the Community College Research Center. So as John just talked about, one of the barriers that blocks students from reaping the potential benefits of dual enrollment are student eligibility policies, such as those that require students to take these high stakes placement exams in order to be eligible for dual enrollment. So for the next part of our webinar, I'm going to share what we learned about the efforts in Ohio to help eliminate this barrier for students through the innovative program policy and our evaluation of this policy. Before I turn to the evaluation, I want to spend some time focused on what the innovative program policy is and what drove Ohio to create this policy. So in 2015, Ohio passed legislation to create what's called College Credit Plus, which is the state's dual enrollment initiative, and it's designed to increase high school students' college and career readiness. College Credit Plus was very successful in expanding access to dual enrollment, and more than 15,000 students started taking dual enrollment in its first 2 years. At the same time, though, there were concerns around students' access to College Credit Plus coursework, particularly for underrepresented student groups. And this was because the data on enrollment in College Credit Plus was showing that Black and Hispanic students accounted for 12% of students participating in College Credit Plus, even though they made up about 20% of all students that were enrolled at Ohio public schools. And so in light of what the data was showing, state leaders raised concerns that the requirement that students take a standardized exam in order to participate in College Credit Plus and score above certain thresholds in math, reading, and writing was creating a major barrier for students. And so 2 years after College Credit Plus was created in 2017, Ohio created what is called the Innovative Program Policy. This policy allows approved high schools and colleges to waive the requirement that students need to take a placement exam and instead use alternative measures of eligibility like high school grades. Or they can provide open access to College Credit Plus courses to students who are interested in taking them, provided that the partnerships create what are called innovative programs for students that are admitted through the policy. Since the policy was created in 2017, community colleges and four-year colleges and university, in partnership with their College Credit Plus high schools, have been applying for permission to implement this policy and have been creating innovative programs, and they must reapply on an annual basis in order to keep implementing this policy. And now I want to share just a little bit more about the policy. So in order to be eligible to waive testing-based requirements, partnerships apply to the state of Ohio with a proposal to implement an innovative program. And Ohio does not require innovative programs to be designed in any particular way or to use any specific type of intervention. Instead, the state gives partnerships the freedom and the flexibility to propose and design any courses they want or any features they want for the programs, as long as they meet two important criteria. And the first criteria is that programs had to use very intentional outreach strategies to target high school students that were underrepresented in College Credit Plus statewide. And then secondly, partnerships also needed to include additional or extra supports in the programs to help ensure that students admitted through the policy could do well in their coursework. So now let's shift to our evaluation of this policy. In 2023, the Community College Research Center partnered with the Ohio Department of Higher Education with support from the Joyce Foundation to do the first evaluation of this policy. And we were really motivated to do this work because this policy is one of the only equity-focused statewide dual enrollment policies in the country. And our evaluation had two major goals. First, we wanted to get a broad sense of how partnerships were implementing innovative programs. And to do this, we conducted interviews with 15 leaders of innovative programs. 13 of these leaders were from community colleges and 2 were from four-year institutions. And then the second goal of the evaluation was to understand whether partnerships that were using this policy were in fact successful in broadening access to and success in dual enrollment, specifically for 2 underrepresented student groups, and we focused on Black students and Hispanic students. We measured access using students' participation in College Credit Plus courses, and we measured success using students' course pass rates and college matriculation after high school. To answer these questions on access and success, we used college administrative data provided by the Ohio Department of Higher Education, and then we used high school level data from the National Center for Education Statistics, and we ran a difference in difference analysis comparing outcomes before and after the implementation of the policy for high schools that offered innovative programs and for high schools that offered College Credit Plus courses. And so now I'll summarize the results of our evaluation, and I'll start with what we learned about how innovative programs were implemented. So at the time that we did the evaluation, there were 26 innovative programs that had been approved throughout the state of Ohio. Through our interviews, we learned about just a sample of those programs. We learned about 10 programs specifically. And we had 2 really big findings here. And the first was that innovative programs were designed to recruit and support different groups of high school students that were underrepresented in College Credit Plus. And usually the programs were trying to identify students who met multiple underrepresented criteria. And the most common underrepresented students that were targeted through the programs were students of color, low-income students, and students who were the first generation in their families to attend college. And then our second major finding with respect to how the programs were implemented was that the programs really varied considerably in terms of how they were designed. And we think this speaks to the fact that partnerships, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, had really great flexibility with respect to how they could design their programs. So on this slide, this table provides a snapshot of the programs that we learned about. And if you just take a moment and look at the column called programmatic focus, you can see that innovative programs were offered in different academic or educational areas. We saw programs in English and math. We saw programs in career and technical education areas, in STEM disciplines. And then there were also a couple of other programs that we observed in the areas of history and social justice. So really a wide variety of content areas for the programs. And then the rest of the columns in this table help describe the major features that we observed across programs, including their outreach efforts, the alignment of dual enrollment offerings to degrees and careers, career exploration and college advising, and academic supports and instruction. And now I'll give you a little bit more information about the programs, which was just presented in the table. So in terms of outreach, as I mentioned, this was an important criteria of the programs, and we observed that colleges and high schools across the programs were each making some type of outreach effort to students. High schools tended to lead these efforts, and they most often consisted of high school counselors providing information about programs. Secondly, we saw that 4 programs made efforts to align program courses to degrees and credentials, and then to educate students and their families about these options. And as a quick example of this, one of the programs that we learned about mapped academic or transfer pathways to bachelor's degrees and CTE pathways, and they use these maps to support their outreach and recruitment activities. Half or 5 programs provided students with advising from an advisor at the college. And then we saw that just 1 program out of the 10 included activities designed to support students with exploring their career options. And then we also found that most programs were either using strategies to provide students with academic support or using curricula and instructional approaches to support dual enrollment students. Academic support strategies included things like tutoring and one-on-one meetings between students and staff members to check on their progress. And these were more common compared to efforts to use curriculum or instruction to help support students with their coursework. So that was just a little bit about how the programs were implemented. And oops, I think I skipped ahead. Oh, no, we're okay. So with respect to the impacts of innovative programs, we learned that the college and high school partnerships that waived placement test requirements and implemented innovative programs significantly increased participation in College Credit Plus among Black and Hispanic students. So access to dual enrollment increased, and we saw this through the evaluation. And then we also examined, like I mentioned before, the impacts of programs on course outcomes and college enrollment after high school. And we found that even though more students had access to dual enrollment courses, course pass rates among Black and Hispanic students did not change, although gaps with students overall persisted as well. We also did not find that the implementation of the policy resulted in gains in college matriculation after high school. And it's important for me to mention here that many students we tracked in the evaluation graduated high school during the early years of the pandemic. And so this may have influenced students' decisions to enroll in college after graduating from high school. So those were just the very high-level findings from our evaluation. And if you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to take a look at our report, which has more details about our data, our methods, and then the findings that I just shared. And just quickly to close out this portion of the webinar, I wanted to conclude with some of the big takeaways we have based on the results of the evaluation. To start, we think that these findings illustrate how changes in state policy can in fact be used as a lever to expand access to dual enrollment for students in communities that are underrepresented, which, as John mentioned earlier, is really important given that there's so many different types of high school students that are underrepresented in dual enrollment coursework nationwide. However, given the somewhat mixed findings regarding student course outcomes and college enrollment after high school, we think this study underscores the need for policy and practice changes that not only increase access, but also improve student supports and advising to ensure that students are fully benefiting from their dual enrollment coursework. So that concludes the presentation portion of the webinar. And now I'd like to turn to our panel discussion with the goal of understanding more about the story behind the innovative program policy and how the policy has led to more recent efforts in Ohio to expand access to dual enrollment. And also what Ohio has in store moving forward. And I'm delighted to reintroduce our panelists, including Becky Stewart. Becky Stewart, again, is the Program Director for College Credit Plus at the Ohio Department of Higher Education, and she works closely with the department's legislative and policy team to serve Ohio's students and families. Becky is a longtime partner of CCRC and was our partner in the evaluation, and she helped us secure the administrative data that we use for the quantitative strand of our evaluation. And then joining Becky is Nadia Leary. Nadia is the manager of recruitment, my university, and College Credit Plus at Lorain County Community College in Ohio. And most of her work over the past decade has been around implementing and managing Lorain's College Credit Plus program. And she's had a lot of success in that role. So Becky and Nadia, thank you so much for joining us. And let's jump into our discussion. So I'd like to start by going back in time a little bit to 2017, which I agree with John, seems like ages ago. And so, Becky, this first few questions are going to be directed to you. So the state of Ohio introduced the innovative program policy in 2017. So I'm hoping that you can bring us back to that time and paint a picture for us of what College Credit Plus looked like in the state of Ohio at that time.
Sure. Well, you know, as you both have mentioned, we have always had dual enrollment in Ohio since, you know, like the early days when I was, you know, back in the old days, is what my daughter says, when I was young, right? But one of the things that we saw was that it looked very different in different regions of Ohio, was called very different things. So we went back to the drawing board back in 2014, right? And we got what we call in 2015-16, we got College Credit Plus. You mentioned already, whenever we first introduced the program, we had about 40,000 participants that across the state would participate in post-secondary options, or whatever we were calling it back then. We quickly saw that go up to about 54,000 students then in that 15-16 year. Then it went up to 68 and some change, right? So now we're increasing by almost 15,000 students just in a year's time. However, when we started digging down into the data, we saw exactly what you have put up on the screen, Sarah, that about 17% of the high school population in Ohio is African American. About 7% of the high school population in Ohio is Hispanic. Yet when you look at the College Credit Plus data, back then we were seeing about 5% of our students who were African American and about 2.5% of our students were Hispanic. So huge disparities, right, in that. Oftentimes we come together and we say, let's throw everything but the kitchen sink at it, right? And so we had some intense discussions about what should we do, right? And how can we fix this? And we came up with the innovative program. I'm kind of getting into the what's next, Sarah, but who was involved in those discussions?
Yeah.
One of the things I think we do really well in Ohio is talk, right? We talk to lots of folks and we like to talk a lot to them.
We're very thankful that we partner really well with our associations as far as our community colleges, our public and our private institutions are concerned. So they very quickly were coming to the table. But then we needed secondary, right, to come to the table too. And I think very much in the early days, we focused on traditional secondary folks, right? And not necessarily the career tech involvement of those secondary folks. So that will come into play with later questions. I wanted to point that out very quickly. And so basically then we spent all of 15, 16, 16, 17 looking at that data and thinking, what can we do? And then in 2017, basically going to the General Assembly and saying, hey, we've put all of our heads together collectively in these stakeholder meetings. We think that we really want to allow there to be a policy that says you can come to us as Department of Higher Education and the Department of Education and Workforce and ask for a waiver of one of the requirements of College Credit Plus. And the foundation of that has to be this successful partnership, which we're always preaching in Ohio, to have good partnerships between the colleges and the secondary schools. But this was one way to really ensure that. And so then this kind of organic idea of innovative program waivers was born.
That's great. Thank you, Becky.
Sarah, can I kind of brag on the policy for a
Sure.
second a little bit, which I
Yeah.
think was very forward thinking in 2015-16. And, you know, we've looked at a lot of policies to broaden access to dual enrollment. This is one that's unique in that it specified a number of groups that the state had found to be underrepresented in the program, including Black and Hispanic students, but also first generation students from Appalachian regions, a whole list of them, and was really focused on increasing access, but also increasing supports for those students. And I think in both respects, it was very, forward thinking at the time.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's a lot of our focus of our dual enrollment work now at CCRC is, understanding if you're opening the doors to dual enrollment, how are you also supporting students to be successful? So thank you, Becky, for laying the groundwork of the policy and talking a little bit about the actors that were involved. So Nadia, you were at Lorraine when College Credit Plus was created, and later when the innovative program policy came into effect. And Lorraine has hosted a few innovative programs. Can you share how Lorraine used the policy to broaden access and success in College Credit Plus courses?
Sure. As we previously talked about, the main participation requirement in College Credit Plus was test scores, right? And so that was a huge barrier. We know that's a barrier for our traditionally underrepresented students. By having that test score requirement, it's automatically missing out on a huge population of students that we know could benefit from college coursework while still in high school. So allowing us to look at other factors such as GPA, such as a recommendation from a school official, really helped to broaden the participation. Before College Credit Plus even existed, Lorain County Community College was and still is a host to an early college high school on our campus. And we learned a lot of great lessons with our early college students in terms of providing those supports for students, having the extra resources, and having students that would not have traditionally qualified for College Credit Plus, taking that college level coursework and doing that well. And so we thought, well, can we look at those supports and frameworks and adopt those with other populations of students that are not early college? And so that was a big piece of our proposals that we wrote for our innovative pathways. And then really worked with our high school partners. Again, there's that partnership to try and figure out what were the best students, how can we identify the students to enroll that would most benefit from the waivers, and work together to support them once in the program as well.
Thank you, Nadia. So let's fast forward a little bit, going back to 2 years ago in 2022. Leaders in Ohio codified the state statute allowing alternatives to placement testing for determining students' eligibility for dual enrollment. So Becky, can you talk about what the state learned from the innovative program policy and the precedent that set, and also like early adopters of this policy that led to this policy change in 2022?
Sure. Yet again, you heard me talk about, our associations, and John has kind of alluded to this, but we really have always had a strong partnership with the Ohio Association of Community Colleges, right? And we know that the bulk of our students are those College Credit Plus students are at the community college level. And so I always give her credit for this, and I need to go back to 2020 because the literal last day that we were in this building, our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Stephanie Davidson at the time, was standing outside of Dr. Harper's office, and she said, you know what, I think we should, far be it from us not to take advantage of this global pandemic, and let's just shake up student eligibility. And if that phrase doesn't represent who she is as a human, I don't know what else does. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, she means this. She really does mean it. And so what we did then in 2020, since we were all at home and everybody was there in our little squares, was we really started convening some stakeholder meetings and just having early conversations. We knew that we had to apply really quickly to the governor's office, to the General Assembly, for something that would give us alternative measures, right? We could not bank on testing centers to give acuplacer, to give ALEX exams because they were closed. And so we quickly said, let's put an emergency policy 3.0 GPA, right? That was what it had always been. So let's go there. However, we then knew that we had, as Nadia mentioned, early college high schools, which also fall under the purview of us here at the agencies, and was also a piece of my job back in early days of 2020. And so we had really robust data on those early college high schools. And then we have really great institutions like Lorain County Community College that also kept really awesome data. Sinclair was another one. Columbus State is another one. They kept great data, not just about those students, but how students performed in their programs overall with additional supports. And so then we started having these very large scale stakeholder meetings. We did that for about 1.5 years. And then at that point, it was hang on for a second, because now we've got to get the General Assembly caught up. And one of the things that we decided then too was, hey, let's pull that data, right, from those innovative program waivers. And Becky, let's do a data analysis. And can you figure out what the average GPA was in that day? In the early days, there were about 16 programs, but then, as you mentioned, the 26. And so when I looked at that data, I saw that the average GPA of those students was a 3.45. So we have taken 100% of those students, their eligibility for College Credit Plus had been waived, right? They did not have to meet the 3.0 GPA, and they did not have to take the acuplacer and get a certain threshold or a certain ACT score. So we already knew that we had that kind of data on our side, so to speak. And so we called our friends and had the Nadias join us and talk to those. And I see that note. Yes, Stephanie Davidson, Dr. Harper are awesome. But we used them basically to say, okay, tell us what we need to know. And when I mentioned earlier career technical folks, we also invited those friends to the table, right? And we heard things from them overwhelmingly like, hey, those tests that you're giving may not really give you an accurate picture of what those students can achieve. And then we brought the data in behind us. And so we put the pause, and then we got passed, we as agencies got passed by the General Assembly and that next biennial budget, a clause that basically said that the chancellor, in consultation with the director of the Department of Education and Workforce, could then convene panels to identify alternative eligibility measures. And that's how it was codified, exactly like that. It did not define. So then we went back to work for about another 18 months. And we sat there and hashed out what does this look like, right? And we got ourselves then to what is now OAC 33.1.65. I'll put it in the chat here in a second, but basically we changed the rule for student eligibility. So you can have that threshold of a 3.0 basically, or you can have a 2.75 GPA and an A or a B in a relevant high school course as determined by the institution of higher education. I don't want to determine that. We as departments do not want to determine that, because what it looks like at Lorain, you just heard Nadia say, may not be what it looks like in Portsmouth, Ohio, right? When you and John, Sarah mentioned Appalachian students, we have a very system of students in Ohio, right? And so we want it to be purposely open so you can tell us, right? Like, what does that look like? So those courses that they use at Lorraine may not be the same courses that they would use at Ohio State, right, to determine that eligibility. So that is up to the institution. But basically, we took all of that early college data, we took the research that the community colleges had done on their own, and then we took that innovative program waiver GPA and said, let's do this, right? And very quickly, we have always said that the caveat would be, we're going to do this, but we're going to pay attention, right? And we're not going to just leave these students to fail. And so we have then, data's a year behind in Ohio. I don't know if it's the same way everywhere else, but we now have 1 complete year of data. And those students are performing as well or not better, if not better, than their peers. So I'll stop talking now so you can keep going.
Yeah, thank you. You just summarized so much very well, and it's so interesting to hear behind the scenes, like how this policy was created and that it's been successful so far for students. So that's amazing. So Nadia, next question is going to be for you. So we understand that using this innovative program policy is just one of many tools that you have at your institution for opening the doors to dual enrollment for more students, while also ensuring that they're successful in their courses, which you've been really successful at in your role at Lorraine. So I'm wondering if you can talk about the top strategies that you've used to broaden access to dual enrollment, kind of just like a broad picture. And then if you can talk a little bit about how the innovative program policy fits into that broader strategy.
Yeah, so again, I'm going to come back to the partnerships and partnering with our schools. We know that the students that will be targeted with the innovative program waivers are not students that would typically be applying for College Credit Plus. So they're not going to be the ones that are beating down their school counselors' doors to apply. So we're working really closely with the counselors, with the teachers, with other administrators, with anyone at the high school to figure out who are our best fits. And that is done through information sessions, personal letters. We had one school that sent out letters to students in a certain range of GPA and just said, hey, we think you would be really good at taking a college class. They had an overwhelming response of students that then were like, hey, I think I can do, just that little bump of confidence from someone in a district to let them know this is a possibility for you. So that's been really big. Similar to that, year-end celebrations. We celebrate the little milestones, right? So one of our newer waivers was for students that had no college plan, targeting students that just didn't know what they were going to do at all after high school, and giving them a taste of what was there. And so upon completion, we bring them out to campus and say, hey, congrats, you did this. Yeah, you earned a couple credits, great, but you did, and celebrate them and let everybody on campus know as well. And so I think that gives a really big boost of confidence, of celebration, and gets them excited then about continuing their journey. We assign advisors, and this does fit in with the innovative policy and of course the state law that everyone has to have in College Credit Plus an assigned academic advisor. But we assign specific advisors to specific schools. And so there is a person and it's the whole school and they follow them, and they are not only their College Credit Plus advisor, but they work with students that come to LCCC post high school graduation. So there's one contact. And another big thing we do is that we take it to the schools. We know that transportation is an issue, especially for students that are under-resourced. And so do they have to test eventually or test for something? We take it there. Is there a mandatory in orientation? We take it to the school. Is there an advising meeting that has to happen? We go to the high school to make that happen. And then that ties back to the partnerships with the schools, because we have to work with the school counseling office to make that happen. But we have that trust, we have that relationship, and are able to coordinate that. And with the innovative program policy, we think it's really important for students to be connected we say that we're giving them extra supports. We are, because we're going there, but we're also bringing them to campus because we want them to realize that they're a college student. And so they're meeting with our writing center, they're meeting with our tutoring center, they're talking with accessibility services if they have those needs at the high school level. So we're trying to show them all of the supports, whether it's meeting them at their high school or bringing them to campus to show them that they're there.
Thank you, Nadia. Loved hearing about the collaboration with the secondary partners and then also exposing high school students to the college and helping them build that identity and motivation for college, like you touched on as well. So my next question is for both of you. And I'm wondering, what advice do you have for college and high school practitioners that are interested in using dual enrollment eligibility policy to expand access to dual enrollment for students and families in their communities that otherwise have not had access to dual enrollment? And specifically, if you could make any recommendations about where practitioners can start with this work. And I don't know, I'll open it up. I don't know who wants to go first.
Nadia, you can go.
Well, one thing that struck me, and as we were talking about some different things, when the legislature dropped to the GPA, then when they didn't require testing anymore, I would recommend to districts, you have to get over the fear. I think there's a lot of fear when this first happens, right? Like, oh my gosh, we can't do this because they don't have the college level test. We have to do this and they have to have a 3 point. Oh no, if we drop it down, people are going to do badly. You have to get over the fear. Even with our waivers, even with opening up a participation, we track our students, and Becky mentioned all of our data, which is my second point. That's my second recommendation: data. We found that 92% of our dually enrolled students have a pass rate of C or higher in their classes. 92%. That far outpaces our traditional student population. And that's a C or better. In Ohio, a D is considered passing. So there are students that are still earning college credit, but we're looking at an even higher GPA. So I think there is still the misconception, and there's definitely the fear out there that, oh, these students can't do it. We got to get over that. We know they can. We put those supports in place, and track the data, because you'll see that they do perform well.
Great recommendations.
I
Becky?
think if anyone is really reading behind what Nadia has said, you'll listen and you know that the lift is large. The lift is big, right? And so I always try to preface that now when someone reaches out to me and says, hey, we really want to be an innovative program and we have this idea. It's definitely become more of a dialogue and not just a, hey, there's an application, just apply for it, right? And to the best of our ability, because we're a tiny staff, but we want to have open dialogues, right? So we do make sure that it does fit the community, right? One of the things I think that I've learned just as far as this initiative is concerned is start small. Because we have, as you mentioned, 26, and we have some that have like less than 10 students in it, but we have a few that are in the upwards of several hundred students. And if you've listened yet again to what Nadia said, they are really providing intense supports to those students, right? They're wrapping their arms around these young men and women to make sure that failure is not an option, right? We're gonna get you to passage. And so because that lift is large, I think it's better and you have more intention if you just start small, right? And have dialogue. Lately, Nadia has kind of mentioned they've evolved greatly at Lorraine. They very much are reactionary to the state of Ohio, what industry is coming in. My Lorraine friends are the first ones to jump into that, right? Like, let's pivot and let's think about how we can really use those innovative programs. So if I really could caution, make sure that your infrastructure is not shaky, right? That you have a good framework that's built, and start very small. I give the same recommendation and advice for the early college high schools, right? The lift is big, because the piece that we haven't touched on here, and I will say it, is that Nadia is not getting any extra funding to run that program, right? So that lift of that money is on that partnership, right? And it's really an in-kind partnership, right? If we're talking about grant language, they're giving a bunch of resources and things that represent dollars to one another in order to ensure student success.
Yeah, it's such
Thank
an
you, Becky.
Yeah, it's a great point, Becky. And if I could just sort of jump in with a reaction, because we've been to Lorain County Community College. We've visited Lorain High School and seen the early college high school and met with the folks there. And I'll just add to that, it really is that sort of extra lift and support that I think you're talking about, Nadia. It's a great example of like, if you're bringing it all to the school and partnering with the school, you're catching those students in the hallway after class. You've got the counselor and the teacher and the advisor all on board, and you're using data not just from like a tracking outcomes perspective, but from like a don't let any students fall through the cracks perspective, really operationally. I mean, I think those 92 plus course pass rates are really hard won, with a lot of effort going into them. And it is an investment too, as you mentioned, Becky. There's a lift there. And, I know you have, a few staff in your office, Nadia, and, I would think like what we've seen both in Ohio and outside of Ohio is that there really are growing incentives for post-secondary institutions and community colleges to really make that investment, not only because it's the right thing to do for your students and your community and your mission, but also because all of that extra effort to get students who might not otherwise have gone to college to go to college and come back to your college, on a pathway to a degree that leads to a good job, that's all sort of pays off, not just in terms of your mission, but in terms of down the line revenues and kind of re-enrollment at your institution and getting more students to go to your college instead of no college. And there's a question in the Q&A that's sort of asking about the alignment or mapping to pathways, and like transfer pathways. And I shared some examples, but also just want to lift up too that I think this is something that we're seeing happen at many colleges, including yours at Lorain, where there's just excellent. This isn't just about any college coursework. This is about, shaving off 25% of the cost of a bachelor's degree in chemistry from one of your local partners, or of your associates in manufacturing from your institution. So I think all of that kind of plays into, yes, this is an investment, but there's this return, both to students and communities, but also like just to institutions. It really is a strategy where enrollments are declining otherwise.
Thank you for those insights, John, and for the recommendations, Nadia and Becky. So to wrap up our panel discussion, I want to talk a little bit with you both about the next frontiers for your work. And so, Becky, I was hoping you could start with talking about what's next with Ohio. Where do you want to take this work? If you could talk about, just important lessons that you've learned and ways that you want to refine what you're doing based on what you've learned so far. We'd love to hear about that.
One of the things I wrote down, Sarah, when I was preparing for this is that we want innovative programs to be at the forefront and not an afterthought, right? It wasn't something, I don't think, until, yet again, it came to the forefront because of this eligibility conversation. Up until then, it was something that we saw. There were 16 people were just dabbling. I mean, we are educationally rich in Ohio, but still we have less than 30 of those innovative waivers. There was also a great deal of concern internally from both agencies about what's going to happen to innovative programs, right? When we alter student eligibility. And thankfully I was proven right, because I'm like, they're just going to pivot. And they did, right? Because while we amended student eligibility, we would still need a waiver for those students that are in what we love to say is the missing middle, right? The 2.5 to the 2.75. And we also know that data says that they succeed too if they have supports around them. And we all know that have ever worked at an institution or with students, we know that. And so now it's me, like being in meetings with my colleagues and being involved in these initiatives and thinking to myself, we should put an innovative program to work here, right? This would be a really good opportunity for an innovative program instead of, now I'm seeking them out, right? Instead of me just waiting for them to come to me. And we have an initiative right now that is a health preceptor pilot in Ohio. That's a combination of the Department of Health and the Department of Education and Workforce and some of our workforce folks at ODHE. And I was pulled in because they were like, hey, we need a midterm College Credit Plus course. And am I listening? And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, we should build an innovative program waiver off of this, right? Like we should do that. So bringing that to the forefront of conversation and not just an afterthought of like, hey, let's do this because Intel's coming, right? And that's something that our administration, they love our innovative program waivers. They especially love to spotlight our innovative program waivers, and they like to talk about it. But I think now the pivot is definitely focusing for us to encourage more participation. But then also for us, and this is always my pet project, the biennial budget is getting ready to come back, right, to us. And last time, I don't talk about this a lot, but last time I put together a proposal that would get us some funding behind that. It's not a guarantee, right? But it's definitely worth asking for again. And I certainly will do that because we believe in the work, right? We believe in the work that's being done. And I love that Nadia talked about the fear because we don't know what we don't know. But we need to figure out what the students know, and not all the time. I mean, when we're talking about College Credit Plus in general, we often hear, I've gotten 5 emails in the last 2 days. I didn't know anything about this, right? And so I have to find students to talk to, right? How to fix that kind of combination. So I think as far as innovative programs are concerned and where we're going next, I think it will be, can we put some funding back behind those to support this big lift that's on these folks? Not a guarantee. We'll see where that agenda leads us, but certainly Nadia knows this. I'm never afraid to ask. So they can always tell me no, right, Nadia?
Well, we're excited to hear what happens. Nadia, what about you? What's up next for Lorraine?
Well, Becky knows what I'm going to say, because another innovative waiver that is coming through the state was recently passed and codified, is a statewide innovative waiver where an institution will be able to, in partnership with an industry in the state, create a statewide innovative pathway that, once approved, any other institution can hop on and offer for their students. So there are lots of conversation. Of course, LCC is going to jump right on this one. But yeah, so we're looking specifically with industry and how we can further these partnerships, and then excited to see what other institutions are going to do around the state as well. So that's big. And we also know at LCCC, again, part of our data, we find that if our students take even one class as a high school student, one college course, they are twice as likely to earn a credential after high school. And so we have been charged by our president to basically double our dual enrollment population in the next 10 years. So there's the innovative waivers are going to be a huge piece of that for us to reach that goal, but also to get students ready, college and work ready for the state.
Thank you, Nadia. Becky, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say thank you, Nadia, for mentioning that. I love it because and yet again, whose idea was that? That wasn't ours. That was them putting their heads together, right? As institutions, as associations, and coming back and saying, and I'll never forget, because in that budget discussion, my chief of staff pulled me aside and said, hey, what do you think about this statewide thing? And I said, listen, far be it from me to ever stand between a student and a job at Intel. Right? And so let's figure it out. I'm not going to say no, right? I'm not a no person. I'm okay, let's put our heads together and figure out how we're going to do this. And we're tiptoeing, right? And we finally got the packets up, Nadia. FYI, they're alive now. So you can go to the website and see them. And so it took a while, but we are. And I think the really important piece of that too is now we're bringing industry into play, right? So it's not just us creating that partnership with a secondary school. It's now encouraging that partnership with industry. So if we want to keep our very talented students in Ohio, which they are extremely talented, we got to take everybody, right? So we're putting industry and secondary and post-secondary all together, and we're figuring it out. And Jenny mentioned too, there is a question that's in the Q&A, and I see that, and we're asking about the school of, I think the School of the Deaf. I want to say about that, that's an interesting piece. This was something, yet again, you don't know what you don't know. We had a few folks contact us about 2 years ago and say, hey, we have some students that would like to participate, but we can't figure out the mechanism for how to fund them because their funding doesn't come through the traditional ways, right, behind the foundation funding in Ohio. And those were the students that were either in a juvenile correctional facility or the students that were in the School of the Deaf, the School of the Blind. So I say reach out directly to me, Allison, and let's have a chat because I think we can figure that out. So yet again, let's get some roadblocks out of the way.
Well, thank you both. This has been such a fruitful conversation, and I know we just have a little bit of time left for Q&A. I'll pass it over to Jenny to moderate that part of the webinar.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, I wanted to get that question to you, Becky, and yeah, I agree. You guys can figure that out. I know you guys have a history of innovation and flexibility, so I'm glad that we're getting you connected to the right people. Thank you all for being here. I'm not seeing any additional Q&A right now, but I know several have been answered. John, do you want to maybe go over some of the ones that were already asked and that you had to which you had already responded? Or would you like me to read them? Well, that's okay. John might not be able to hear me right now.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, this first one is, I think, Nadia, you might think about this, but like, how do you help high school programs of study? Oh, Kiki, this, if you can hear me, yeah, the question, Nadia, like, can you talk more about helping high school staff with the advising, like exploration and dual enrollment aligned to a program of study? It was asking for a graphic as a reference, which I gave a couple links, but you also have a great website like My University, you know, so do you mind talking more about that and pointing people in the right?
Yeah, sure. And you know, again, this came out of requirement of legislation that we all have the 15 and 30 credit hour pathways. Each secondary school has those pathways with an institution of higher education. But we tried to be really proactive and intentional about creating pathways around specific programs. So if you have a student that wants to go into nursing, we have created a pathway to show them what those courses are, to show courses that would go into a biology degree, that would go towards an English major. And the state of Ohio is really fantastic in terms of Ohio guaranteed transfer pathways that again are courses that will not only transfer but apply to specific majors at all of our state institutions. So we are in constant communication with our counselors about those items, getting them on our websites, sharing them with students, and sharing them with the school counselors so that they feel empowered and knowledgeable. Because we know there's a lot that school counselors know that I do not know. I don't want to know. It's too much. We know that, and I know that we have a lot of stuff on our college side that they just can't get into their everyday work life balance. So we're happy to provide those pieces. And yeah, on the web, our website, Ohio Department of Higher Education, really great examples there.
Well, thank you all so much for being here today, John, Sarah, Nadia, and Becky. MEC is grateful for the dialogue and about learning about all of the innovation and flexibility in the Ohio model. It is an inspiration to all of us and definitely a promising practice that we hope others will consider and possibly adopt. I wanted to remind everyone that they can please complete our survey. It is in the chat. Mary has shared it. And we also want to remind you that our next webinar is on July 23rd, and we're going to be taking a look at all of the amazing things happening in Indiana. So please join us for that one. And this will be recorded and all the materials available for you on the MEC website. And we will continue to explore and showcase all the great work going on in the Midwest and in other parts of the country. So if you want to stay informed, please subscribe at the link Mary has provided. We have a quarterly newsletter and we have a lot of advisory groups we pull together to kind of unpack and create some clarity and some more connections within the concurrent enrollment and dual enrollment community in the Midwest. Thank you, everybody.